She was the most powerful person in the world. In the year 700 AD, Zetian had ruled China for a decade. She had outlasted emperors. She had survived assassination attempts. She had built an empire on the bones of anyone who stood in her way. And she had just 1 year left to live. In that year, the year 700, she picked up a pen. And she did not write a decree. She went over their heads. In May of 1982, a 26-year-old farmer named Chu Shihuai was planting trees on Mount Song, in central China. At the summit, he pried open a gap between two rocks. Something inside caught the light. Golden. Thin. He reached in and pulled it out. It was a strip of gold, about the length of a ruler, covered in tiny characters, carved in an elegant script. Chu had no idea what it was. He thought it might be foil like the paper wrapping on fancy mooncakes. Then he showed it to someone who could read. Within days, the find had traveled from his village to the provincial government to the National Museum. Chu was offered $10,000 for it, a fortune in 1982 rural China. There were rumors of people offering 10 times that. He refused them all. He gave it to the state. What he had found was the only personal object in existence that was directly linked to Zetian herself. No other piece of jewelry. No rope. No letter. Nothing else survives from her hand. Only this. A strip of gold 36 centimeters long, weighing just over 200 grams, carrying a message she had written 1,282 years ago. And the message was not for the history books. It was for the gods. Here is what she wrote, in her own words, though a court calligrapher held the brush. The sovereign of the great Zhou Zetian, who delights in the true Tao and seeks immortality, hereby approaches the sacred gate of Mount Songshan. I cast down this golden tablet, and I beg the 3 officials and 9 courts, remove the crimes, remove the sins of Zetian. In the year of the great mutant, the 7th month on the 7th day. This was written in the year 700. Zetian was 77 years old. And I want you to understand why those 63 characters are one of the most extraordinary things any human being has ever left behind. Every emperor in Chinese history sent prayers to heaven. Every single one. They asked for longevity. They asked for blessings on their dynasty. They asked for rain and good harvests and peace. Zetian asked for something different. She did not ask the gods to confirm her greatness. She did not ask them to ratify her reign. She asked them to remove her name from a list that existed only in her own mind, and in the minds of every man who had ever hated her for sitting on a throne that was not, by their rules, meant for her. She was not writing to the court historians. She was not writing to the scholars who called her a usurper or worse. She was going over all of them. She carved her words into gold, the most permanent substance she could find, and she threw the tablet from the peak of the tallest mountain in central China. Not into a library, not into an archive, into the hands of whatever gods might be listening. And she waited for 1,282 years. To understand why she did this, why she wrote to heaven instead of to history, you have to understand what her world looked like at 77. By this point, she had been emperor for 11 years. She had killed or ordered the killing of rival claimants to the throne, including her own nephews. She had driven to suicide members of her own family. She had built her power on the backs of a system of informants and secret police that historians still argue about today. But she had also, by most measures, been a genuinely effective ruler. She expanded the imperial examination system. She promoted talented administrators regardless of their family background, something almost unheard of in Tang-era China. She maintained the empire's borders. She built infrastructure. If you were a poor farmer's son with brains, Zetian gave you a real path to power. Both things are true. She was brilliant and she was ruthless. And here is what the history books never quite tell you. She was also tired. Tired of the performance. Tired of the accusations. Tired of waking up every morning knowing that no matter what she accomplished, someone, a court official, a Confucian scholar, a nephew with a grudge, was already writing the chapter that would explain why she didn't deserve any of it. Her health was failing. The men she trusted most in her final years were not the ministers of her youth. They were a pair of brothers she had taken as close companions, Zhang Yizhi and Zhang Changzong. She loved them. Court officials whispered about them. The imperial family despised them. Then in the spring of 705, when she was 82, a group of her own ministers, led by an 81-year-old prime minister, launched a coup. They brought 500 soldiers to the palace gates. They killed the Zhang brothers in the inner chambers. And they marched into the empress's bedchamber and told her it was over. 1 day later, she named her son crown prince. 3 days later she abdicated. The Zhou dynasty she had declared 11 years earlier was dissolved. The Tang dynasty was restored. Wu Zetian was sent to a palace on the outskirts of Luoyang called the Upper Yang Palace. Stripped of her title. Surrounded by strangers. Alone, the records say something striking. Before the coup, she took great care with her appearance. After the coup, she no longer bothered to wash or dress her hair. Her face grew thin. Her body grew weak. She died less than a year later. And when they buried her not as emperor, but as empress. Wife of Emperor Gaozong. A wife. Not the woman who had ruled the world. Just a wife. Now if you travel to her tomb in Shaanxi province, the place called Qianling, where Wu Zetian lies beside her husband, you will find something extraordinary standing in front of the tomb. 2 stone monuments. Right next to each other. On the west side is the most elaborate imperial inscription in all of Chinese history. 5,000 characters, carved by Wu Zetian herself, celebrating her husband's reign. She gilded the letters so they would shine for 1,000 years. On the east side stands something completely different, a single block of granite, 7.5 meters tall, 100 tons, and it has no inscription, not one character, not one word. This is the famous wordless stele, and it is one of the most mysterious objects in the history of the world. Wu Zetian commissioned it herself. She ordered the finest stone, the finest craftsman, the most skilled calligrapher in the empire prepared to write her history. And then she stopped. She left it blank. Why? There are 3 stories people tell about this. The first, she was so extraordinary that no words could capture her, so she stayed silent out of pride. The second, her own son who succeeded her, was so bitter about the way she had treated his family that he refused to write anything kind, and left it blank as punishment. And the third, and this is the one I keep coming back to, is that she left it empty on purpose. That she knew the argument about her would never end, and she refused to give her enemies anything to argue with. She carved 3,000 empty squares into the stone, 3,000 spaces for words she never wrote. And she let them stay that way, as a message to every historian, every scholar, every man who would ever sit in judgment of her. I will not let you write my story, not my enemies, not my historians, not anyone. And then, and this is the part that gives me chills every time, she went and hid the only text she did write on a mountain, where only the gods could read it. Here is the question that historians argue about to this day. When Wu Zetian wrote "Remove the crimes of Wu Zetian," what did she actually mean? Some say she was genuinely afraid, that in her final years she felt the weight of everything she had done, and she wanted to be forgiven before she died. Others say she was performing, that she understood the language of divine ritual, and she used it the way any emperor would, to strengthen her legitimacy through the language of cosmic order. But here is the reading I think matters most. She was doing something far more political than either of those things. She was placing herself under a different court. A higher court. A court where the rules were not written by the men who had spent her entire life trying to bring her down. Think about it. For 60 years, Wu Zetian had been judged by one standard and one standard only, the standard of men who believed a woman had no right to rule. She had been called a sorceress, a criminal, a usurper, a monster. She knew, she had always known, that no matter what she achieved, the verdict would always be the same. So she went over their heads. She did not write to the court historians. She did not write to the scholars. She wrote to heaven. And here is why that matters. Heaven, at least in the Taoist tradition she was invoking, does not care about Confucian gender norms. Heaven does not care that she was a woman on a man's throne. Heaven judges actions, not the gender of the person who took them. That is why she used the word she used. Not bless. Not confirm. Not vindicate. Remove. She wanted her name cleared. Not in the court of public opinion, not in the court of history, but in the only court that mattered to her. The court of the universe itself. The gold tablet is on display today at the Hunan Provincial Museum. 36 centimeters long, 230 grams, 63 characters. 63 characters that may be the most quietly radical thing Wu Zetian ever wrote. The historians will argue forever about whether Wu Zetian was a monster or a genius, a feminist icon or a tyrant, a brilliant ruler or a lucky criminal, but she settled that argument herself 1,282 years ago. She knew the game was rigged against her, so she stopped playing it on their terms. She picked up a pen, she carved it into gold, and she sent her message to the only authority she trusted more than the men who hated her: the sky. History never lets anyone be sure, but she was sure enough to bet everything on it.